The day my son told me I needed rest, he looked at me with the kind of concern every father hopes to see in his child one day. He sat across from me at the dining table I had built with my own hands 25 years ago and said, "Dad, you've done enough. It's time you slow down." His voice was calm, gentle, almost protective. I remember leaning back in my chair, studying his face, wondering when he had grown into a man who could speak to me that way. After his mother passed, it was just the two of us. I worked double shifts. I missed holidays. I skipped vacations. Every sacrifice had his name on it. So when he said I deserved peace, it felt like all those years had finally produced something good. He told me he had arranged a 3-month trip overseas. "Just rest," he said. "No stress. No bills. No repairs. Let me handle everything here." I hesitated at first. I had never been the type to sit still. But he insisted. He said my blood pressure had been high. He said the house needed renovations anyway. He said I could return to a refreshed home and a lighter life. That sentence convinced me. A lighter life. It sounded like reward. He handled the bookings quickly, almost urgently. The flight was scheduled sooner than I expected. "The sooner you leave, the sooner you relax," he joked. He packed my suitcase himself. Folded my clothes carefully. Even added a new jacket he bought for me. When he drove me to the airport, he kept reassuring me that everything back home was under control. "Trust me, Dad," he said as he hugged me goodbye. "I've got this." I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my son. The first week abroad was peaceful. The air felt different. The mornings were quiet. He called me every day at first. Asked about my sleep. Asked about the food. Sent pictures of the house with workers painting walls and replacing tiles. "You won't recognize it when you get back," he laughed. I felt proud telling people that my son was renovating the family home for me. I told them he insisted I finally enjoy life. But slowly, something shifted. By the 3rd week, his calls became shorter. By the 5th week, he missed some. By the 8th week, I was the one calling him, and he often did not answer. When he did, his tone felt distracted. "Busy, Dad," he would say quickly. "Everything's fine." I told myself not to overthink. Young people have responsibilities. I did not want to become the suspicious father who questions everything. As my return date approached, I sent him my flight details. No response. I called again. Phone switched off. I convinced myself he was planning a surprise. Maybe he wanted to finish the renovations before I arrived. Maybe he wanted to welcome me properly. When my plane landed, I scanned the crowd for his face. He wasn't there. I waited 30 minutes. Then an hour. My calls went straight to voicemail. I felt a small knot form in my chest, but I refused to panic. I took a taxi home, telling the driver my son must be caught in traffic. As we pulled up to my street, I felt something unfamiliar. The house looked the same, yet different. The porch light had changed. The gate keypad looked new. I stepped out confidently and entered the code I had used for years. It didn't work. I tried again carefully. Nothing. I laughed lightly, embarrassed in front of the driver. "He must have reset it," I said. I reached for my keys. The main door lock looked shinier than before. I inserted my key. It would not turn. I tried the spare key. It didn't even fit. My heart began to pound louder than the quiet street around me. The taxi driver watched silently. I knocked on the door, thinking perhaps my son was inside and had simply upgraded the locks. After a few seconds, the porch light switched on. The door opened slowly. But it was not my son standing there. It was a woman I had never seen before. She looked at me cautiously and asked, "Can I help you?" For a moment, I could not speak. I glanced past her shoulder and saw furniture arranged differently. Pictures on the wall that did not belong to me. I cleared my throat and said calmly, "This is my house." She frowned politely and replied, "Sir, we rented this house 2 weeks ago from the owner." My ears rang at the word owner. "Who is the owner?" I asked quietly, though I already feared the answer. She checked something on her phone and said my son's name without hesitation. In that instant, the long journey, the months of rest, the careful hugs, the promises, all collapsed into a single realization. I had not been sent abroad to recover. I had been sent away to be removed. I did not argue with the woman at the door because deep down I knew she was not the enemy. She was just another person who believed a story she had been told. I stepped back from the entrance of my own house and felt something heavier than anger settle in my chest. It was disbelief. The kind that makes you question your own memory. I asked her politely when they moved in. 2 weeks ago, she said. 2 weeks. That meant my son had signed papers, collected rent, handed over keys, and watched strangers walk into the house I built, all while I was sending him pictures of parks and peaceful streets overseas. I thanked her for the information and stepped aside as she slowly closed the door, still confused about who I was. The click of that new lock sounded louder than any insult. I stood there on the pavement holding my suitcase, staring at the windows where my wife once placed curtains with her own hands. I called my son again. Straight to voicemail. I sent a message, "I'm home. The locks are changed. Call me." No response. My neighbor across the street opened his gate carefully. He walked toward me with hesitation in his steps. "Warren," he said softly, "I thought you moved permanently." I turned to him slowly. "Moved?" He nodded. "Your son told everyone you decided to retire abroad. Said you transferred the house to him so he could manage things." In that moment, the picture became clearer. This was not an accident. This was not confusion. This was preparation. A narrative had already been built around my absence. I felt embarrassed standing there, as if I was the one who had done something wrong. The taxi driver had already left. My suitcase felt heavier than before. I asked my neighbor if I could leave my bag in his garage for the night. He agreed quietly, still avoiding my eyes. That avoidance hurt more than the lock. It meant people believed the version my son had told them. I walked to a nearby lodge and paid for a small room. As I sat on the edge of the narrow bed, I replayed the weeks before my trip. The urgency. The quick signatures. The way he rushed documents in front of me saying they were for travel insurance and renovation approvals. I remembered asking once, "Are you sure everything is in order?" And he had laughed, "Dad, you worry too much." That laughter now echoed differently in my mind. I barely slept that night. Every hour I checked my phone, hoping for a call. None came. By morning, something inside me shifted. Grief was still there, but clarity began replacing confusion. I went straight to the property registry office. I requested documents. When the clerk printed the records, my hands trembled slightly. The title had been transferred to my son 3 months earlier. 3 months. That was before I even boarded the plane. My signature was on the documents. Clean. Clear. Official. I stared at it carefully. It looked like my handwriting. Because it was. I remembered signing quickly, trusting him, believing him. I felt a wave of anger rise, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. Anger without strategy is weakness. I left the office and went to the bank to check if any other changes had been made. The house had been listed for rental. The rental deposit had already been paid into his account. He was not just testing independence. He had taken ownership fully. I stepped outside and called him again. This time, he answered. His voice was steady, not surprised. "Dad," he said, "I thought you'd understand." That sentence froze me. Understand what? I asked him calmly why the locks were changed. There was a pause on the line before he spoke again. "You needed rest. The house is too much for you. I'm handling everything now. It's my responsibility." Responsibility. He used the word like a shield. I asked him one direct question. "Why didn't you tell me you transferred the house?" Another pause. Then his tone hardened slightly. "Because you would have overreacted. You don't like change." I closed my eyes and felt the weight of that answer. He had not acted in confusion. He had acted in calculation. He believed I was too old to fight back, too trusting to notice, too tired to resist. He thought sending me away made me irrelevant. He underestimated one thing. I may be aging, but I am not absent. I may trust, but I am not blind. And as I stood there on that street with documents in my hand and betrayal in my chest, I made one silent decision that would change everything. I would not shout. I would not beg. I would not embarrass myself in front of neighbors who already doubted me. I would move carefully, strategically, and with patience. Because the same man who built that house from empty land was still alive, and this time, I would not be sent away quietly. The next morning I did something my son never expected. I did not call him. I did not argue. I did not beg. Instead, I went to see an old friend of mine named Harold, a retired attorney who once helped me review contracts when I was still running my small construction business. Harold lived quietly now, spending most of his time reading and tending to his garden, but his mind was still sharp. When I told him everything from the rushed signatures to the sudden transfer, he did not interrupt me once. He simply listened, folded his hands, and asked one simple question that changed everything. "Warren, did you sign those papers in good faith believing they were something else?" I answered immediately, "Yes." He nodded slowly and said, "Then this is not just a family issue. This is misrepresentation." That word hit differently. Misrepresentation. It meant what happened to me was not just betrayal. It was deception with intention. Harold explained that if someone tricks you into signing documents under false explanation, the law can step in. My son believed I was too emotional to think legally. He believed I would collapse under shock. But shock fades. Strategy remains. Harold advised me to gather every piece of evidence. Every message. Every call record. Every date. Every timeline detail. Facts are stronger than tears. I returned to the lodge and started organizing everything. I pulled up our old messages where he insisted I leave quickly. I found the texts where he said he needed my signature urgently for travel insurance. I checked my flight dates and compared them to the property transfer date. The pattern was clear. The transfer happened just days before my departure. The tenants moved in exactly 2 weeks after I landed abroad. That meant the plan was already active before I even unpacked my suitcase overseas. My son had not made a quick decision. He had built a quiet plan. As I reviewed more messages, I remembered something important. During my time abroad, I started recording short daily video diaries on my phone. I did it because I wanted to remember the experience. In some of those videos, I had conversations with my son on speaker. In one particular recording, he mentioned casually that he had people interested in the house. At the time, I thought he meant future renovations. Now I understood the meaning. That recording was no longer just a memory. It was evidence. I immediately backed up everything and sent copies to Harold. Within days, he prepared a formal legal notice challenging the property transfer based on fraudulent misrepresentation. The letter was precise and firm. It demanded immediate response. When my son received it, he reacted exactly as Harold predicted. He showed up at the lodge that same evening. Not with apology. Not with regret. But with frustration. "Why are you doing this?" he asked the moment he walked in. I looked at him carefully. He looked confident, but beneath that confidence was worry. I answered calmly, "Because I did not agree to what you did." He tried to defend himself. He said the house would be his eventually anyway. He said he was just being practical. He said I was old and needed supervision. Supervision. That word almost made me laugh. I asked him one simple question. "If your plan was honest, why didn't you tell me clearly before I left?" He did not answer immediately. He walked around the small lodge room like someone trying to rearrange a story in his mind. Then he said something that revealed his true thinking. "I knew you would never agree." That was the confession hidden inside pride. He knew I would not agree. So he removed my choice. That moment was painful, but it also strengthened me. I realized this was no longer about property. It was about respect. He had mistaken kindness for weakness. He had mistaken trust for ignorance. I told him calmly that the legal process had already started and that I would see it through. His tone shifted slightly then. He warned me that fighting publicly would embarrass the family. I responded quietly, "Embarrassment comes from actions, not from truth." He left without shaking my hand. As the door closed behind him, I felt something surprising. Not fear. Not sadness. Determination. The boy I once carried on my shoulders believed he had outgrown me. But he forgot something important. I taught him how to think. I taught him how to build. I taught him patience. And now I would use those same lessons. This was no longer just a father returning home. This was a man reclaiming his dignity carefully, legally, and without raising his voice. And for the first time since I landed back in this country, I felt something solid beneath my feet again. Not the ground outside my locked house, but the ground inside myself. People think betrayal is loud. They think it comes with shouting and doors slamming. But sometimes betrayal is quiet. Sometimes it smiles at you, books your flight, carries your suitcase, and tells you to rest. My name is Warren Cole, and I trusted my son with everything I built. I did not raise him with luxury. I raised him with discipline. I raised him with sacrifice. After his mother died, I became both father and mother. I worked weekends. I missed birthdays. I said no to myself so I could say yes to him. So when he sat across from me one evening and said, "Dad, you need a break," I believed he meant love. He told me I had done enough. He said he would manage the house, the bills, the renovations. He said I deserved peace. No father wants to hear that from his child and doubt it. So I agreed. He arranged everything quickly. The ticket. The packing. Even the ride to the airport. He hugged me longer than usual and said, "Trust me." I did. The first few weeks abroad felt calm. Fresh air. Quiet mornings. He called me often at first. Asked if I was sleeping well. Sent pictures of workers repainting the house. Said he was upgrading things for me. I felt proud. I told people my son was taking responsibility. But slowly, the calls became shorter. Then fewer. Then almost none. When I told him my return date, he did not respond. I told myself he was busy. I did not want to imagine anything else. When I landed, he was not at the airport. That was the first sign. When I reached my house and my keys did not fit, that was the second. When a stranger opened my front door and said she rented the property from the owner, and then said my son's name, that was the moment everything changed. I stood outside the house I built, holding a suitcase like a visitor. My neighbor told me my son had informed everyone that I retired overseas permanently. He said I transferred the house willingly. That lie had already spread before I even returned. I did not shout. I did not argue with the tenant. I left quietly and rented a small lodge room for the night. That night, I replayed everything. The rushed signatures before my trip. The documents he said were insurance forms. The urgency in his voice. The property transfer had happened before I even boarded the plane. It was planned. Not emotional. Planned. The next morning, I chose not to cry. I chose to think. I visited an old friend who used to be a lawyer. I explained the entire situation calmly. He listened and told me something simple. If consent is gained through deception, it can be challenged. That sentence became my strength. I gathered evidence. Messages. Dates. Voice recordings. During my trip, I had recorded small video diaries. In one of them, my son spoke about having people interested in the house. At the time I thought he meant future business. Now I understood. That recording became proof. We filed a legal notice. When my son received it, he came to see me. Not to apologize. To complain. He asked why I was embarrassing him. I looked at him and realized something painful. He did not feel guilty. He felt interrupted. He believed the house would be his one day anyway. He believed I was old and easier to remove than to confront. I told him something he did not expect. Inheritance begins after death. I am still alive. He had no answer for that. The court reviewed everything carefully. The timeline exposed the truth. The transfer was reversed. The rental agreement became void. The house returned to my name. I walked back into my home quietly. I did not celebrate. I did not shout victory. I simply changed the locks again. But this time, not out of fear. Out of clarity. People ask if I forgave him. I did. Because hate is heavy, and I have carried enough weight in my life. But forgiveness does not mean access. I changed my will. I added conditions. Respect is now part of inheritance. My son eventually tried to apologize. I listened calmly. I told him if he wanted responsibility, he should have asked for it, not stolen it. I am not angry anymore. I am wiser. Sometimes the deepest betrayal reveals the strongest part of you. I was sent away to disappear. Instead, I returned aware. I was locked out of my house. But I was never locked out of my dignity. And dignity, once defended, becomes the foundation no one can ever take from you again. When I look back at everything that happened, I no longer see just betrayal. I see a test. A test of trust, patience, dignity, and strength. My name is Warren Cole, and the day my son told me to go abroad and rest, I thought I was stepping into peace. I did not know I was stepping into a lesson. I believed his concern was love. I believed his urgency was care. I believed his promise to manage the house was responsibility. Instead, it was preparation. Preparation to remove me quietly from the life I built. When I stood outside my own home with a suitcase in my hand and a stranger living inside, I felt something break inside me. Not just trust in my son, but trust in my own judgment. I replayed every conversation. Every document I signed without reading carefully. Every moment I chose comfort over caution. That pain was heavy. But pain can either weaken you or wake you up. I chose to wake up. I could have shouted. I could have cried publicly. I could have begged him to reverse what he had done. But I remembered who I was before I became a father. I was a builder. I was a planner. I was a man who understood that emotions fade, but decisions last. So instead of reacting, I started thinking. Instead of accusing, I started gathering facts. The rushed paperwork. The timeline of my departure. The property transfer date. The rental agreement signed while I was overseas. The story he told neighbors that I had retired permanently. It was all connected. It was not confusion. It was strategy. And if he used strategy to remove me, I would use strategy to restore myself. With the help of legal advice, I challenged the transfer. Not out of revenge, but out of truth. The law listened to evidence, not tears. The recordings from my time abroad, where he spoke casually about interest in the house. The proof that I signed documents believing they were insurance forms. The timeline that showed everything was arranged before I even boarded my flight. Slowly, the narrative shifted. The same community that believed I left willingly began to understand what really happened. My son thought sending me away would silence me. Instead, it clarified me. The court reversed the transfer. The rental agreement was cancelled. The house returned to my name. When I walked back through my front door, I did not feel victory. I felt awareness. The walls looked the same, but I was not the same man who left months earlier. I had learned that love without boundaries invites misuse. I had learned that trust without verification creates vulnerability. I had learned that age does not equal weakness unless you allow it to. People ask me if I forgave my son. The truth is simple. I forgave him in my heart because bitterness would only poison me. But I also adjusted my life wisely. I updated my will. I organized my assets carefully. I placed responsibility where respect existed. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting lessons. My son eventually came back with softer eyes and quieter words. He apologized. Maybe it was regret. Maybe it was fear. Time will tell. But I told him something important. If you wanted responsibility, you should have asked. If you wanted leadership, you should have earned it. Taking what is not given does not make you strong. It only reveals insecurity. I do not hate him. I do not wish him harm. But I no longer confuse kindness with surrender. The biggest lesson I learned is this: sometimes the people you build your life for will test the foundation you gave them. And when they do, you must stand firm, not loud. Calm strength is more powerful than angry reaction. I was sent abroad to rest, but I returned awakened. I was locked out of my own house, but I unlocked a deeper understanding of myself. I was treated as if my time had passed, but I proved that experience does not expire. This story is not just about a house. It is about dignity. It is about a father who refused to disappear quietly. It is about understanding that respect must flow both directions. If you are watching this and you have ever felt underestimated because of your age, your kindness, or your silence, remember this: silence is not weakness. Patience is not ignorance. And rest does not mean surrender. Sometimes the greatest comeback is not loud. It is steady. And when the dust settles, the truth always stands taller than the lie.